Okay, so today I thought that we would start just by asking a question and then using a verse from the Bible to try and answer that question. So the question that I want to ask today is, how do we best respond to God's call? And the question can be a bit vague and a bit daunting, and so I thought that we should try to put the question in context first. So what I want to ask is, how do we as children, young people, teenagers best respond to God's call? And the verse that I want to use to address that is from 1 Timothy, chapter 12, verse 4. And it reads, "Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young, but be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity." And I chose the verse, firstly, I suppose I should give context. I chose the verse because Timothy was one of the friends and students of Paul, who was one of the apostles. And so Timothy's relationship with God really stemmed through his conversations with Paul. But Timothy was known for being one of the younger disciples, probably the youngest. And so he has a lot to say that we can draw from. So if we go back to the beginning, don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. And we try to ask ourselves, well, how does that apply to us trying to respond to God's call? I think that a lot of young people get the idea in their heads that they are not autonomous, that they exist only to respond to other people, that they have to listen to what their parents say, to what their teachers say. But I would say that that's not true. And I would say that although the Bible does provide for that in some sense, the Bible also says that you can be a leader, not just to other young people, but to adults. And so I think that we get overwhelmed when we hear that. We think that we have to do something big and terrifying that's going to change the world. But I think that the thing to be learned here is that we can be leaders in small ways too. And that brings us to the second part of the verse, which is in your faith, your purity, in the way that you talk and the way that you act. And so I think that it can honestly be harder sometimes to do the little things. You know, if God were to tell you to pick up all your things and move across the country and start a new life in his name, you would be alarmed, but you would think of yourself as a hero, that you would be on the news and people would know your name, people would know God's name, and it would be this amazing thing. But if God tells you to go sit next to that weird kid in the cafeteria, you don't feel like a hero, you feel like an outcast. And so I think that through these verses we come to see how young people like Timothy, were able to look to God in those times of being small leaders. And so I want to challenge you as well to be small leaders in that sense. And I think another thing that is difficult is the idea of evangelism, and of sharing your faith with people. And for people who are a bit uncertain in their faith, then you should definitely focus on the first step. But for people who are more comfortable, there's something to be said for talking to other people about God. But especially when you're young, you are uncomfortable, you think that nobody's going to listen to you. But I would just say that when you talk to other people about God, it doesn't have to be this big proclamation of you waving signs in their face and telling them this is how they need to believe and this is how they need to practice. You know, it's enough for you to just be a good person and to be patient and kind and forgiving. And then when people ask you, wow, why are you so patient, so forgiving, so happy? You can just tell them, well, it's because I believe in God. And in that sense, it's its own form of evangelism, and it's a step that you can take. And so for those of you who are ready to move in that direction, I challenge you to do that as well. So thank you very much, and I will see you all tomorrow.